reminded me that, you know, you're all 20 or 21 or something, and getting out of bed at not 10 o'clock in the morning is probably a bit of a stiff ask. It's nice to see you, and at least 3 of you just nodded your heads then, so clearly Matt is on the money. It's good to see you all. Welcome to the first class I'm picking that it's your first class of the semester. Can I have verbal or non-verbal confirmation of that, please? Yeah, it is. Good on you for getting up. Yep. Wherever you are, whether or not you're at halls or at home or in a flat, welcome along to Tūrangawaewae Identity and Belonging in Aotearoa. Isa, that's you. Who else are you with?
Hi, I'm with Emma.
Hello, Emma. Oh,
which one? Loading.
Isn't it? Okay. Stay with us, Emma. You look like you're in a lab. You're in a computer lab on the campus somewhere.
Oh, we're in the library, yeah.
Okay, nice one. Is that going to prevent you from talking if you're in the library? Are there going to be people saying, shh, don't talk?
Everyone's talking.
Okay, good, excellent. Guys, it's good to have you here. Let's make a quiet start. We've got from 10 until 12. We're probably going to use all of that time today. My main objective today is to make sure that whenever we wrap this up, you don't have any questions at all, for this week at least, about the course and where we're supposed to be and where the tutorials are and what kind of work is coming down the line at you and so on and so forth. So can you just make sure that by the time Pete and Janelle and Matt, who I'm going to allow to introduce themselves shortly, once we've done our thing today, you're all good on the question front. Couple of ground rules. Actually, can you just give me a bit of an indication? I know it's kind of hard to do this on the screen, but how many of you have used Zoom before as a classroom environment? Okay, some of you have. That looks like about a 50% strike rate. So you'll know what the etiquettes are. Couple of things, just to make this as functional as we can. So that's the first rule, is you need to mute yourself, please, if you're not talking, so that we don't pick up what's going on with your flatmates or your hall people in the background, because sometimes that's fascinating, but more often than not, it's more information than we really need to have. So if you can mute yourselves before you're speaking, that would be great. Second thing is, it's lovely to see lots of your faces. If you are happy to put your camera on, that would be really lovely, because Pete, Janelle and Matt and I have been teaching on Zoom on and off for the last 2 years. And it's quite dispiriting to have little black screens, sometimes with people's names on them, sometimes not, sometimes cats. The cats are gorgeous, but we'd rather see you. So if you're happy to have your cameras on, that would be lovely. Otherwise, it's just kind of dehumanizing. We just look at black boxes for 12 weeks and it doesn't do our teacherly brains much good. So yeah, if you can switch your camera on, thank you. If not, that's sweet. What we would normally do around about now is just kind of whip around the room and see where you are and where you're from. That's a little bit harder to do in Zoom. So we might just quietly dispense with that, partly because you get a chance to do that when you're in the tutorials, which we will be doing face-to-face. One other thing before I ask these other guys to introduce themselves, please. If you've got a question, would you mind raising your hand like Ewan just did? You can use the chat function down the bottom, but sometimes that means our attention gets split between trying to deal with what's in front of us and what's going on in the chat. Matt and Janelle and Pete will keep an eye on the chat function, but my preference would be for you to just raise your hand. That way we can engage with you rather than having to split our attention by typing. Okay, let me shortly.
Just a point, in case you're not familiar with the keyboard shortcuts, it's under, raising your hand is under the react.
Okay. Is there anything, guys, before we hook into the content and the structure of the class, is there anything at all that we can do to sort the tech out, make you feel comfortable about being in the Zoom environment? Okay, I think Olivia, there's that cat. We're gonna have a running cat meme, aren't we? Okay, I'm just going to start by asking Pete and Matt and Janelle, who my co-teachers on this course to introduce themselves. And then I will briefly introduce myself. And then I'll share the screen with you and I'll pull up a PowerPoint slide and we'll duck in and out of the slide over the next however long it takes us to get through it. There is some stuff in there that we really have to get through. Some of it's a wee bit discretionary, so we'll just see how we go. Whatever we wind up doing will be fine and we'll pick up the rest of it in the tutorials. Just please remember, primary function today, sort your questions out. Any concerns, any questions, that's what our focus will be on today. I'm just going to start at the top of my screen and go from left to right. Pete, would you like to introduce yourself, and then Matt, and then Janelle?
Sure. I'm Pete McGregor, and my background is in science rather than in the humanities, but I've been in the humanities for long enough to, I think, understand it reasonably well. I used to work for Landcare Research, and I worked on everything from bumblebees to pasture pests to house dust mites and so on. Then in 2008, I think it was, I started teaching a big course on science communication here at Massey, and that went on for 10 years. And then after that, in 2020, I started teaching Tūrangawaewae. And of course, I'd only just arrived and we went straight into lockdown. So it was quite good that I'd had experience in teaching distance as well as internal. But yeah, I have a lot of experience at editing as well. So I have a particular fondness for writing, so I can certainly help with that as well as the course content. Okay, that's me, Matt.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I have been working on this paper since, I think, when it started in 2017. Was that when we?
Yep.
Yeah, so man, I mean, back then 2021 just seemed like the distant future. 2021, 2022, the year that we're actually in. I'm taking the Tuesday and Thursday tutorials, so I'm taking 2 of them. Is that not right?
Yep.
I'm taking the Tuesday one.
We'll get to
3 till 4, SSTE 345.
Oh yeah, I'm taking the Wednesday 10 to 11 and Thursday 1 to 2 shoots. So yeah, I mean, been doing this for a while. Really love this paper. We typically get to know each other quite well through the tutorials because people turn up every week and I'm your kind of the tutor's your main contact for all the assignments and everything. So combined with the shoots and the critical reflections, which are weekly, we get to kind of know each other pretty well by the end of the semester, and usually it's pretty fun. So yeah, I mean, I'll introduce myself properly in the tutorial and we'll go over the assignments, the first assignment in the tutorial. So for now, I'll just say looking forward to getting to know you all, looking forward to exploring the course content with you. It was a great paper. Yeah, and we'll get to talk and shoots. So see you then.
Thanks, Matt. Janelle.
My turn. Kia ora, everyone. I'm Janelle. I am the newbie to this paper, to tutoring this paper. So I am finishing up my master's degree in sociology. So both me and Matt, sociology based. But as we go through, I mean, it kind of this paper is a lot sociological anyway, from my perspective. And I'll be doing the Wednesday at 3 shoots, but we'll get into that later. Yeah, so I'll be tutoring internal in Manawatu. And yeah, just looking forward to getting through the content, getting into it, having chats, and I'll probably introduce myself more to the Wednesday 3 p.m. people.
Thanks, Janelle. One of the things that is unusual about this paper is that it's a cross-disciplinary paper, and by that I mean that we have Janelle and Matt who have backgrounds in sociology, but we've got Pete who's basically from the other side of the campus, who brings a scientific perspective to things, and my background is in political science. The content of the course, the videos that you'll watch and the readings that you'll read and the various other artifacts that we make available to you are from all sorts of different bits and pieces of the college. So you'll get a whole series of different perspectives on the content that we deal with in the course, and it winds up being a particularly strong and a powerful course for that reason. I think it's kind of like the academic version of biodiversity rather than a monoculture. I'll talk about that a little later on. My name is Richard Shaw. I'm the course coordinator this year. Matt and Janelle and Pete do most of the hard yards, particularly the face-to-face stuff. If you're not sure of the distinction between a lecture and a tutorial, the lecture is the big storytelling part. That's what we're going to have today. But the tutorial is where you get the chance with a smaller group of people, generally somewhere between 15 and 20, depending on who shows up, to drill down and to ask questions that you might feel a little whakama about asking in a class, and to speak with other people and to tease specific things out and get into much more discursive or dialogical relationship around the content. So the tutes are like the small work-based context. So the tutors are really critical to this course, because my sense would be that a good lecture will tell a really good story and get you thinking and get you reflecting, but the tutorial is where you chew that stuff over. So those three are really critical to this course. I have a different role. This course was developed and taught in 2017. As Matt mentioned, I was the course coordinator at the time. And I taught this course for 3 years. I went away and did some things with other people in other parts of the college, and I've come back this year. And it's one of the aspects of my work that I'm most looking forward to. My work is, I'm a professor of politics, but I don't have a great deal to do with the politics program at the moment. I'm also the director of the college's arts programs, which means that I get to sit in an awful lot of meetings and talk about the strategic direction of the humanities and the social sciences at Massey. So this is the one opportunity in my week to come and hang out with the people who make the university what it is. My understanding of the university is that its primary function is to work with people like you. So I'm really happy to be back in this context, having been away from it for some time. All right, so that's Janelle, that's Pete, that's Matt, and that's me. In about 15 seconds, or maybe sooner, depending on whether or not you've got any questions, I'm going to share the screen and pull up the PowerPoint slide, and we'll just work methodically through things. Are you all clear on how to ask the question that you have burning in your mind? You either use the chat function or our strong preference. You click on the reactions button, and at the bottom of that, there's the raise hand function. Hewan, excellent. Hewan, ask your question. We know who Hewan is because he's just disappeared.
Oh,
He's
okay.
back.
We're working. No, I was just seeing if it would actually work. Sorry. And sorry for not having a face cam on. I tried to connect my laptop to the internet, but it just doesn't want to work with us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Hewan, that's because you don't have a Mac. I bet you've got one of those other kinds of things, eh? Yeah.
Windows.
A Windows, yeah, whatever. I don't understand them. Hewan, that is fine. Don't you? If you can put your face cam on at some stage, that would be great. Otherwise, don't worry about it. And thank you for letting us know that you're here and that at least the audio is working. Can you hear us okay, Hewan?
Yeah, I'm all good. I do actually have a friend that's also in the course that apparently isn't able to connect. For them, it says waiting for the host to start.
Well, the host has well and truly started. That's kind of weird. Can you get them?
I had a similar problem because I was trying to get into the Zoom from the week 1 link, and it was just sitting on the waiting. So when I went back to the welcome and pressed this one, I got straight in.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I don't know if that's it.
Yeah. But Hewan, can you
Thank
pass that information on to your person and see how they get on, please?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, that's interesting because it's exactly the same link that we just reproduce all the time. But that's really useful intel.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you have a problem, I've pasted the same link in each week of the stream site. If you have a problem getting in, come straight back to the landing page and try the link that you've used today, because clearly that works. I was saying to Pete too, I did notice, I thought it was quite sweet. I did notice that about 10:30 last night, been away for the weekend, came back to see if anything COVID related had occurred. And about 7 of you were sitting in the Zoom room waiting, I don't know, for something to happen at 10:30 on a Sunday night, clearly just testing the link. So Hewan, pass that information on. Okay, is there anything else, guys, before we move on?
I've just noticed that the link is in fact different for week 1. The on the welcome page, it's got a little from equals add-on or something.
Right.
So it's, although it looks identical, it is actually different. So that might explain it.
Let's go
We can
back.
fix that.
Make a wee note, Pete, please, for me, and I'll go back and we'll make sure that everything is katapai. Maria, you haven't, what's going on with Maria? Microphone isn't working. Yeah, no, we can't hear you, Maria. Sorry. So maybe just use the chat if there's a question that you've got to ask, mate. Okay, I'm going to share the screen now. Matt and Janelle and Pete will keep an eye on the chat function just to make sure that we're clear through. And guys, if there is a question that comes through, just roll straight in over the top of whatever I'm saying and make sure that we clear that one away. Okay, can you all see that? That should be way back at the beginning, not there. Can you guys all see that? Okay. We don't need that screenshot because we know what we're doing. Here's what I'd like to do with you today, and we may not get through all of it, but these slides will go up online after the lecture. That's something that we'll do each week. We're going to record these, but I don't want the recordings to go up online. I'm happy to give them out by demand, but I don't want to place them up online, partly because the files are so huge they crash stream, but also because if we do that, it's a real disincentive for people not to come, and I'd much rather you came to the classes. So these are really, the recordings are really by way of backup. The critical thing for us today to do is to explain what the course is about, what the assessment is, what the lecture outline is, and how we're going to run it. We've got a hybrid model this semester, online lectures and face-to-face tutorials, but there are a few particulars that we need to work through about the tutes specifically. So we'll go through all the course admin stuff. This is just the first of a gazillion opportunities that you'll have to ask questions about what we're doing and why we're doing it and when we're doing it. So let me just run through the main headline items and we'll clarify things further on in the tutorials as well. I would like to have some time to look at the broader context in which this course sits, both in terms of the core curriculum, which is part of the Bachelor of Arts, which the overwhelming majority of you are enrolled in. Sorry, I'm just getting messages flying across my screen about people wanting to be admitted who had a late coffee. But also I want to talk about the context in terms of broader changes in the world outside, which explain partly why we take the approach that we do to this particular course. We'll find some time to define some of the core terms for this first assignment, which is due at the end of this week. It's a gentle, easy 750 worder. There's lots of material on the stream site and the course glossary and the course text. You'll have your tutorials. So if you don't get through all of those core terms, I'm not particularly bothered by that because you'll have lots of opportunities to do it, but we'll make a start on that stuff. And then there'll be a little list of things to cover off, a little sort of a checklist to make sure that we're okay with where we're heading from here on out. Okay, we've done that. You know who we are. Let me just go through some sort of formal looking stuff, which is it's a little dry and it's a bit antiseptic, but it just explains what the course is about and why we're doing the sorts of things that we're doing. Some of you will have come across this before. If you've been on the stream side, and I know that numbers of you have, and you've downloaded the course guide and you've had a look through it, you'll have come across these things called learning outcomes. The learning outcome is like the scaffolding that wraps around the course. We need to use certain words, and you wouldn't be reading the stuff late at night on a Sunday unless you wanted to put yourself off to sleep fairly quickly. But these things are important because they send signals to you about what it is that we will be looking for you to have achieved by the end of the course, assuming that we do our jobs well, and we will because we know this course and we're good at it and we have significant teaching expertise across the four of us. Importantly, assuming that you do your part as well, which we don't entirely control. We have some agency over that, but in the main, the choices that you make about the amount of work you do and the extent to which you engage with us are yours, and we will support you on that. But here are the four things that you will be able to do at the end of this course, all other things being equal. There's some descriptive stuff in there. So what we want to do is to put in front of you material that speaks to events and processes and occurrences and happenings which have shaped the way this place is and the way the people within this place are today. So we'll put some descriptive stuff in front of you. We'll talk about Anzac. We'll talk about the protests in Wellington at the moment. We'll talk about other protests. We'll talk about the arts. We'll talk about political institutions. We'll talk about a whole range of different things. And then we want you to reflect on those things. So we want you to have the opportunity to show to us that you can reflect on many different ways in which people express their sense of who they are and their understanding of the place in which they stand in this country in the early 21st. It's not quite early, is it? We're not really mid 21st. I don't know, somewhere between early and mid 21st century. This course is really about this country, the many different threads that make this country up, and the ways in which people make sense of themselves in that broader context. So we want to describe some of that stuff. We want you to reflect on some of that stuff at the national level. We want you also to bounce kind of in and out of the relationship that you have yourself with the different social, political, economic, cultural, gendered contexts in which you move. So we aren't just interested in what's out there in Aotearoa New Zealand. We're interested in the way in which you engage with it and relate to it, the way that it shapes you and you might have shaping effects upon it. So there is some descriptive stuff, there's reflective stuff at the high level, there's reflective stuff at the level of you as a person. And then we want you to be able to stand back from all of that material and ask questions about some of the big stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves in this country. And you'll be familiar with the tropes and the memes and the narratives and the myths and the legends and the way in which we call into existence our understandings of what it means to be in this place at that time. We use essentially sociological narratives, but it's not explicit, specific to sociology. The idea that there are stories that people tell and narrate to themselves to make sense of the world is broadly spread across the disciplines in our college. And there are some really powerful ones. And we look at 3 of those in particular, we get to those shortly. And we ask questions of them because those stories tend to tell a partial truth, but they often obscure some things as well. So what we want you to be able to do essentially at the end of this course is to be able to walk around this country, to take yourself off on an intellectual and a political journey to interrogate the way that this place is at this particular point in time, this particular juncture, what the influences have been, whose voices have been heard, whose presences might have been denied for certain periods of time. So we want you to have a critical understandings of belonging and identity, both at the personal and the national level. So those are the broad learning outcomes. And we structure the lectures and the assessment to channel you in those directions. We've got a course graphic that we come back to routinely. You'll use this particularly in the tutorials, and we'll use them from time to time to structure some of the content in the lectures as well. There's quite a bit going on there, and I'm not going to stop and go through every particular one of it, every particular aspect of it. I think the main stuff for our purposes today, and we're going to come back and revisit these points when we look at some of the critical concepts for the first assignment, is right down the bottom there, the bottom line that says threads and encounters and contexts. One of the things, and a number of you were at the welcome on Wednesday of last week, where I made much this comment. One of the things that marks you and Pete and Janelle and Matt and I apart from other parts of the university is that we are innately curious people or nosy people. We want to know how people tick, and we want to know what influences them. We want to know why they think the way they do and behave the way they do and have the kinds of friendships that they do. And what we're interested in at the bottom, that bottom line then, in other words, is we're interested in the things that make somebody up. We use the language of threads. So we talk about identity threads in this course. It's loosely used. We're trying to avoid using deterministic or language that is overly causal. But what we're suggesting to you is one way of making sense of this place and your place in it is to think about the different dimensions of yourself, and they might be gender, and they might be age, and there might be political economic proclivities, and there might be socioeconomic class, and it might be where you were born or where you hope to go to, or the nature of the relationships that you have with the people with whom you're intimate. Those are the sorts of things that make up who you are. To some degree, those things are shaped by the encounters that you have with other people in particular contexts. One of those contexts is a university. Another of those contexts might be the family or whānau or whānau groups that you are a part of. You might be a member of a voluntary organisation. You might be a member of a church group or a netball club or whatever the case may be. You have online gaming communities. So you move in a variety of contexts, some of them real and some of them material and some of them immaterial or digital. So those contexts take place at different scales and they're distributed in different parts of the world, and you move in and out of them. And the encounters that you have with people, the ways in which you learn to make sense of the different contexts in which you're in, they shape the kind of person you are. You in turn can shape those contexts. What that diagram tries to do, I'm not convinced that it does it especially well, so we're working on a second iteration, is just to look at the ebb and flow of the relationships that you have. The guy with the bloody lawnmower next door is just about to turn it on. And he does this every freaking week, even though the lawn doesn't need to be mowed, he's going to turn his fucking lawnmower on. And I don't know what to do except close my window and and you're just going to have to put up with the noise. Guys, just I'm going to give you another slide and you can talk amongst yourselves. Matt or Pete or Janelle, do you want to come in and just briefly talk to the topic outline while I do some noise deadening effects? I'll be back in about 15 seconds. Hang on.
Sure, yeah. So the paper is broken up into 4 modules. The first one that we're doing, I think they're vaguely like two weeks each, I think. 2 weeks faces, 2 or 3 weeks voices, places, and then right at the end of the paper, we get to stories. And the one that we're focusing on in these first couple of weeks is faces, and that's the one that relates to this first assignment, A1, which I think is due quite soon. Richard's going to talk about it when he gets back, and we'll talk about it in the first assignment, in the first tutorial. But the faces module is all about basically explaining this idea of threads, which is the central idea in the paper, identity threads.
That's good, Matt. I'm back now.
Okay.
Is that all right? You want to keep going or shall I jump back in?
I can't hear any lawnmower, by the way.
Oh, you will. You will when he comes about 2.5 meters away from my window. He'll fire it up big time.
Okay.
Yeah. Matt, thank you. Matt's just brought out four modules. So we sliced the content up into 4 different slices. The first, today's not really a part of the formal modular structure. This is just an introduction. Kicking off next week, we have 2 modules, which are an attempt to try and portray, engage, work with you to appreciate the changing faces in a metaphorical sense within this country. So this place is not what it was 15 or 20 years ago in terms of the diversity of ethnicities and cultures and religious groups and so on and so forth. So we use the word faces figuratively to look at the people who are here. I'll do the lecture on demographic diversity next week, and then Te Moriarty, who is a mate of ours from Te Putahi Atoi, the Māori Studies Department, will come in to talk about tangata whenua in week 2. Then if you move across to the right-hand side, we'll go into the second module, which speaks to a second piece of assessment, and that has to do with the notion of voice, the ways in which people give voice to their aspirations or their hopes or the things that anger them or the things they wish to achieve, the way in which they try to find a place for themselves in the various communities in this country. We'll start off, and this is where we will bring in some of the material, I think, that's happening on the forecourt of Parliament at the moment. We'll talk about the way in which people seek to express their aspirations and their needs and the things that are important to them, their priorities in political terms. Some of that will involve formal parliamentary politics, but we'll talk about politics in a general sense. Then we have a topic on protest. The third of the voices topics, we'll get a colleague of ours from Wellington who works with this kind of stuff to come in and talk about the performance of voice through various artistic mediums. So we have faces, the people with whom we share this place. We have the voices, the things that those people aspire to, and sometimes they're in contest and they're in conflict, and we need to find ways of resolving those or otherwise. And then we look at the contexts in which those kinds of encounters take place, and we talk about 3 different types of place: physical places and institutional places and digital places. The first of those, the physical places, will focus on contested understandings of home. The second of those will be a lecture on the institutional arrangements that apply within universities and the ways in which those structure people's behaviour, and the third of those will be around digital places. And then in the last module, we pull all of those things together and we talk about stories. the narratives that New Zealanders transact in order to explain the way they are, often to other people, but often to themselves as well. One of those is the notion of egalitarianism. That one's under stress and under threat and under pressure. We'll talk about house prices and rental increases and income and wealth inequality and so on. And then we will bring somebody in. Oh, Matt will do this one. Matt's got a great lecture actually on, I mean, they're all great lectures. This is a particularly good one, I think, because of the sort of sociological and historical sensitivities that Matt will bring to this, the notion that we are 100% pure and that the environment is clean and green. And we'll interrogate that one. And the last one is the Anzac story. So if you just stand back from all of those are what the 12 classes look like. We move through faces and voices and places and stories. And as we go through, we'll constantly be referring back to the diagram and just encouraging you to think about the ways in which your sense of who you are through the encounters that you have in different contexts contribute to your sense of where you stand in this place. Okay, that's a really rough, quick whip through the structure of the course. And as we go through it, you'll find that there are phrases and there are terms that we will come back to on a regular basis. We'll talk about threads, we'll talk about contexts, we'll talk about encounters. What I want to do now is just step back from the specifics of the course outline and the lecture content to talk a little bit about the tutes. First of all, about the assessment. Let's do that first. Briefly about the course text and how to use stream. So I want to go into the mechanics of things at this point. Let me just stop sharing the screen at the moment. Can I just check with you at 10:33? Is there anything at this stage that you want to check with Janelle, Matt, Pete, or I? Anything that's unclear? Anything?
I've got a quick thing. I think there are a few people who couldn't get onto the lecture link. I think the week one lecture link was a different link. I'm not sure. We sat there for a while waiting.
We think that might be right, Ruben. So if you know any of those people, can you get them to contact me directly, please? And I can send them out.
I replied to a few replies. I think just saying I think it's a different link. So
okay,
all good.
Good. Thank you for doing that, and we will sort that one out. So apart from Ruben's thing, is there anything else that you need to check, guys? Okay, what I want to do now, I'll go back into the screen share and we'll just have a look at the assessment for the course. You'll have it in your administration guide. So we'll just quickly go through the sort of the headline items, and you'll get a chance to talk about the stuff in much greater detail through the tutorials as well. And this is a point at which Pete and Janelle and Matt, if you want to whip in with reflections or particularly observations around the critical reflections and the short answers, the first assignment, that'll be helpful. But guys, that is what it looks like. You've got 3 major pieces of written work. The first one of which is due at the end of this week. So that's a 750 word piece of work. And then later on, and we don't need to address these 2 at the moment because they're just too far away. I think you've got a second assignment on the voices module of the course and a third assignment, which is on the places and stories part. The critical reflections and the short answer essays are the ones that we need to focus on at this point. Short answers will work through some of that material in this lecture, and that one is due on Sunday with a built-in extension of a week because we're conscious that circumstances may not be entirely propitious for all of you at the moment. The critical reflections are a specific aspect of the course that we might want to spend just a couple of minutes on at this point. Pete, do you want to briefly just run through those and speak to their significance? Mindful that we'll do this again in the tutes, but just to get people going.
Okay, well, you've got 9 opportunities to do these critical reflections. They're only short things. They're a maximum of 300 words. And you just simply, I suggest that you write them in Word and paste them into the Dropbox on stream. And that's the easiest way rather than trying to get them in there. One of the the important things is to make sure that you're not drifting too far off the topic for the week. So you need to do the readings for the week, pick something quite specific about those readings, something that interests you or whatever, and interrogate it, think hard about it, and try and condense what you're thinking about it into that 300 words. Now, you will need to add an in-text citation, but you don't need a reference list at the end. It's simply not place for that. What else do we need to cover, Matt?
We'll talk about the critical reflections and tutorials, but I mean, fundamentally, you just pick one idea or issue or topic from within the weekly topic to write 300 words on. So, you know, in tutorials, I'll give you suggestions of ideas. You know, I mean, if I was going to do one for this first week, I would probably pick something like threads, you know, the central idea of the week, threads or identity. And I would just write a 300 word definition of that based on the first textbook chapter.
What you must be careful of is that you're not just sort of reiterating what's in the textbook chapter. We want to hear what you're thinking about it, not just that you can sort of regurgitate what's in the textbook. So, you know, don't be tempted to just quote widely from the textbook, or even to take something in the textbook and just rephrase it. We are interested in your thinking about a particular point.
Okay, I think that's probably enough for you to crack on with at the moment. Just a couple of observations from me. You remember back to the slide that had learning outcomes, describe this, reflect on that, reflect on the other thing. These critical reflections are one of the ways in which we encourage you into the habit of reflecting thoughtfully and critically on an aspect of the week's content, whether, as Matt has said, it's the primary reading from the course textbook or a secondary reading or something you've come across out there in the world. And it's also a way of keeping you in touch with the course. So you quietly work through. You can do all 9 if you want. Most of you won't. We'll only take your top 5 marks. So you've got plenty of discretion and agency around when you choose to submit those particular pieces of work. All right. Is there anything, I'm going to close that particular PDF file now, anything that people need to question at this stage about the assessment? Mindful that you'll have plenty of time in the tutorials to go through it.
It seems rough, I know, to get an assignment in the first week of a course or the second week, but I think it's fairly established that when you do an assignment early on in the semester, you're more likely to succeed later on in the semester and follow through with the paper. So, and this first assignment is not complicated. You know, it's fairly straightforward, and we'll give you lots of support around how you're going to complete it in shoots.
So just remember that first assignment, the short answers one, is due this coming Sunday. So you need to get onto that. That should be your priority. And then you can start getting into the critical reflections after that.
Week 2, yep. I'm just scanning around to see if there are any raised hands, and I can't see any. So let's put the question of the assessment of the course to one side and come back to that during your tutorials later on in the week. A couple of words about stream and the course text, and then we'll look specifically at tutorials. The course text is the first edition of a book which Ella Kahu and Trudy Kane and I edited. If you can get hold of a copy of that book, I'm really conscious about financial constraints on having had 2 of my own children go through university. If you can get hold of your own copy, it would be helpful. If you need to use library copies, that will be fine as well. The crucial thing is that that's where the curriculum for the course is. It's in the course text. You need to read one chapter from that text every week. The nature of the chapter is clearly specified in stream. Each of the topics is closely lined up with one of the chapters, and that's like the bare minimum. They're not particularly long chapters. They are written in a reasonably reader-friendly style, would be my sense, but at an absolute minimum, you need to read the relevant chapter from the course text each week. On the stream side, you'll find references to secondary or supplementary readings, and numbers of you will read those as well. They will just push your engagement with whatever the topic is a little bit further out. And we've chosen a wide range of articles and chapters and reflections from a really diverse range of people and thinkers. So you get multiple perspectives feeding in through those supplementary readings as well. So in an ideal world, and we're conscious that this is not that world at the moment, you would do the reading from the course text every week, and you would do the supplementary reading every week as well. There will clearly be times when you're under the pump, you've got 3 other courses and each of them has a piece of assessment due. When your engagement with this course might just bottom out a little bit, but don't stay down there too long. At an absolute minimum, come to the lecture, go to the tutorial, do the course text reading, and if you can fit in supplementary stuff, that will be fabulous as well. The stream site is reasonably clearly laid out. I think Stream is a slightly clunky looking thing. It's not a social media platform, it's a student content management platform. So it's a little bit slow and cumbersome, but you have 1 topic block per week. Ruben, thank you for the heads up. I will go back and replace and repair those links. But essentially what you have is the week's work contained in those topic blocks. We will put up the PowerPoint slides and any other associated paraphernalia in each of the topic blocks, but you have everything that you need to know about what needs to be done in that block. So you just work your way sequentially through Stream. Right back at the front end of Stream, and numbers of you will have seen this already, there are a couple of things that you may want to use, particularly the forums. We've got an announcement forum, which is just basically a megaphone that we point out at you. If anything happens, and I can see some things coming down the line, depending on how the Omicron variant plays out, we will broadcast it out to you through the announcement forum, but you can use the other forums to bat things around. Because we have internal contact like this, we tend not to use those forums as much as your colleagues who are doing this course by distance would. But if at any point you've got a question or a comment or an observation or a concern or something that you want one or other of us to clarify, use the Can We Talk About It forum. You can contact your tutors directly using those forums. Mostly you will see them in person, would be my sense, is where most of that problem solving will take place. So Stream has lots of stuff inside it, organized by week. It has some communicative facilities that we will use to keep in touch with you and vice versa. Possibly most importantly, it has a PDF of the course guide. If you've not already downloaded it, I mean, do whatever you want with it, it's available, it's just a PDF. My advice would be you download it and you keep it somewhere close and you read it repeatedly and often. There's quite a lot of information in there. And our experience would be, I think, is that it pays constant revisiting. Just make sure that you know where we're up to with the course, where you are with your assignments, that you're clear on the assignment topics, that you deal with the, you cover off the supporting information that's in there if you need to. So the course guide is like, it's not the heart of the course, that's the wrong word. I don't know what the right word is, but it's got most of the important stuff that you need to know, particularly around times and deadlines and places and people. I can't think of anything else, but Pete can. Pete, go.
Just going back to the forums, once the forums have been, the tutorials have been finalized, each tutorial will have its own forum. So you can talk about things or you can ask questions or whatever within the tutorial rather than to the entire class. So that means, of course, that it's really important that if you haven't already signed up to a tutorial, make sure that you do it now, well, as soon as the lecture's over.
And most of you have. There are only about 10 of you, 12 of you maybe, who haven't. And I think some of you are having problems, and I don't understand why this is getting onto the Stream site. But just to reiterate Pete's point, and then I want to talk specifically about how we manage the tutorials, because they are face-to-face. If you've not signed up for one, can you please make sure that you do so? And if you can't, for some reason, get into Stream, just email me directly with your preferences. 2 of those tutes are full at the moment, and I'll just, when we have a wee break, I'll just confirm that I am correct in thinking that they are the Tuesday and one of the Tuesday ones and one of the Wednesday ones. So your options are a little bit limited. But if you can't get into Stream and you haven't yet signed on, send me a direct email with your preference and I will load you up through the back door. Anything else, guys, about Stream administration, yada yada, or are we okay on that? Ewan, go.
Hi, sorry, people are going to get sick of my voice.
Not at all.
So there's 2 different announcement ones. So on the welcome page, there's the announcement forum, but then in the keeping in touch one, there's also the news forum.
Yeah.
Are you going to be putting both things on those, or?
We will probably just use the announcement one, Ewan, and you will get that because it's a kind of a forced subscription thing. We'd only use it if, I don't know what will be, well, actually, I can think of something. If the university tells us that all face-to-face tutorials are moving online, every other university that I'm aware of, apart from Victoria, I think, have done this. Auckland certainly have. I think Waikato have as well. There's a chance that everything will be moved online. We'll talk about that shortly. We would blast that out, Ewan, through the announcement forum, and you'll get it. So we won't be using the news forum particularly much. I would just keep it, if you want to manually check these things, check the announcement one on the front page.
Thank you.
Okay. If we don't get sick of it.
You can usually see on the forums, you can usually see if you've got unread messages.
Yeah.
So if you just go to those forums and you'll be able to see whether you've got anything unread. So.
Hugh, and just to your point about people getting sick of your voice, that's unlikely because people always appreciate the student who asks the question that they think they might want to ask, but they're not entirely sure about doing that. And Ruben's just nodding his head. So Hugh, and that, if you're not careful, that is going to become your designated role. Hugh is the person who asks the questions that other people would quite like to, but they know that he's going to. And it's a really critical role. So do not worry about people getting tired of your voice. I'm going to go back into the share screen thing, and I think we're up to the tutorials. Here they are. It's a little bit complicated, but I hope that we get into the swing of it. The university is really keen to maintain some face-to-face contact. We didn't have very much of it last year. We didn't have much of it the year before. The university campus is a bit of a tragic, sad place when there are no students around. And it's really keen to have people on campus and having the opportunity to be with each other, albeit under slightly awkward circumstances. These are the rules that Pete and Janelle and Matt and you need to follow for the tutorials. We need to make sure that you are distanced, and some of your tutorial rooms have been shifted a couple of times. I'll get to that in a minute. They've been shifted because we've needed to find larger rooms, essentially. You need to be masked at all times, please. But Matt can remove his, for instance, if he's 2 meters away from you. This is going to have really significant impacts upon your ability to interact in the kinds of small group contexts that we are used to in the tutes. So these will feel like different kinds of tutorials. Please, when you come to your tute room, don't go straight into it. The university has told us that we need to ensure that each room is ventilated for 15 minutes between tutorials. So the class that's in the room before you will leave at about 1/4 to the hour, and you will wait in the corridor where you will be appropriately distanced. The room needs to do whatever it is that air in rooms does for 15 minutes, and then you go in. So your tutor will tell you when it's time to go in and when it's time to go out. The tutes are going to be slightly shorter. We need to finish them at 1/4 to the hour in order to have that ventilation period. Don't come if you're not vaccinated or unwilling to wear a mask, because we will simply call security and they will sort that out and the tute will end. I'm pretty sure that won't be a problem with any of you guys. Those are the rooms at the moment. Tute 1 is in SSLB 6, SGP 102, 3.42, 102, blah, blah. You should have those rooms on your timetables anyway, but if you're unsure about where your room is, let us know and we will confirm that those are the rooms. Would they start tomorrow? We've also got a one-off digital tute or online tute at 10:30 on Friday. There are at least 7 people who in the class who, some of you might be here now, but who can't, who are household contacts and therefore need to self-isolate because they're living with people who are COVID positive. The university doesn't at this stage want us to set up online tutes because that would mean that Matt and Janelle and Peter just kind of doubling up on the work. So they're really keen for us to maintain face-to-face tutorials. This week, I'm going to have one at 10:30 on Friday. I don't know what's going to happen between now and tomorrow and now and the next day. If we need to move people online, if Matt falls over or Janelle or Pete or some of you get sick or whatever the case may be, it may be that we need to close the face-to-face tutorial and put everything online, but we will let you know if that is going to be the case, and we'll give you as much information in advance as we can. At this stage, if you can't make the face-to-face tutorial, come along to this link at 10:30 on Friday. I'll be there and we'll work through whatever questions you might have, which I suspect might concern that first assignment. Is there anything else, either from Matt, Janelle, Pete, or from you about the tutes that we need to cover off at this stage? Okay. In that case, hang on, let me just check that there's nothing else. Yeah, no, that's it. That is all of
the question, Richard, just about myself.
Right.
Sorry, tutors have to come to the tutorial with the mask on.
Yep.
We can take our mask off once everybody's sat down, distanced,
yep,
while we're talking, but
yep,
students have to remain masked for the entire
yep,
tutorial, even when they're distanced.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Apparently the front of the room will be marked off at the 2 meter mark, and as long as we're inside that, we can take our masks off. If we go beyond that to talk to students, then we have to put our masks back on.
It's going to be so weird trying to talk to a whole bunch of masked up students. It's probably worth just saying quickly that these aren't our rules. We didn't make them up. This is just what Massey is telling us that we have to do, and we're all pretty much powerless. So yeah, it is weird, but I'd have to say that for those of you who were there on Wednesday, it kind of warms up after a while. Occasionally, you have to ask people to repeat themselves because you're not entirely clear you've heard it. But particularly with the Wednesday welcome with the BA, at which a number of you were, was, you know, it got cranked up after a while. It's not ideal, and all things being equal, and we know that they may not be, this will be the only time we need to do it. From next semester on, we'll be fine. So, but let's just hold off on that one. Those are just the rules that the university requires of you and of us at this stage. Danny, go.
So let's just say we get COVID. What do we do? Do we email you guys? Like, where do we tell people? Like, what do we do? The arrangements at the moment, Danny, are such that the categories of the close contact category and the adjacent contact category have gone. The only categories that are left under phase 3 of the red traffic light are household contacts. So anybody else, like the tutorial will continue to proceed, except that you won't be there. So you just let your tutor know, Danny. If you're in halls, I assume that there are protocols and procedures around that. But as far as this course goes, if you can let us know that you won't be there because you have tested positive, or you're a household contact of somebody who has tested positive, that would be great. That's all you need to do. Just flick us an email or use the tutorial function in the stream site, and then we'll know who you are. And then we can work with you to, if Pete does a PowerPoint show or Janelle's got a particular activity or whatever, we can flick that out to you. We can do whatever we can to keep you abreast of whatever was done in the tutorial. The regs that I saw yesterday from the university said that at some point, it hasn't been quantified, at some point a tutorial may need to go online if a significant number of its participants can't participate.
But if it were to do that, it would be temporary. It wouldn't be a permanent state of affairs. And I would imagine that it would last for 2 weeks and then we'd revisit that. But we'll let you know if that's the case. And Matt and Pete and Janelle and I will need to talk about what that threshold is. We don't know. But we get to decide that. Is that all right, Danny?
Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any other questions from any of you before we take a short break? Okay, let's just have a wee break now. My clock says, my watch says 5 to 11. You want to come back in about 10 minutes? Head off and do whatever it is that you do in 10 minutes between classes. And when you come back, I just want to run quickly through some of those core concepts for the first assignment with you, just a really brief whip through to give you a bit of a sense of what you'll be working with. And then I want to talk to you a little bit more about the context in which this course sits. Okay, go away and I'll see you in 10 minutes time.
By go away, what Richard means is you can turn your video off and so on, but please don't leave the meeting because you might have problems getting back in.
Oh my
and we'll
God,
have
yes,
to readmit you. So
yeah, no, we don't want to do that. Quite right, Pete. Go away, figuratively speaking. Just turn your camera off or not, or stay here if you want to. Up to you. I'm going away, turning the camera off. See you in a couple of minutes. Amy Lee, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm right. Did you have trouble finding this room?
I did.
And that'll be because you quite rightly used the link on the first lecture week, which is slightly different to the one on the landing page, which is what we've used. So that's my fault. I need to go back and repair all those links. They got buggered up in translation. So
I've fixed it.
oh, good man.
It's okay.
You're all right. Oh, go on, you, Pete. Good for you. Amy Lee, this has been recorded anyway, so if you want me to flick it through to you, happy to do that.
That would be good
Okay.
eventually after this.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get this finished first, eh? How many of you are in halls of residence at the moment? What we used to call the hostels? Most of you are not. Okay, you are.
I am.
Right. Are there? What is life like over in them at the moment? Is it sort of what you would expect? Is it normal?
Are you asking me?
Anybody who's there?
I'm really enjoying it so far. Made lots of new friends, so that's really cool.
No, there are no reported COVID positive cases as far as we know yet?
There are in some halls, but not in mine right now.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right, when do you think we should start again? 11:05, eh? Give them 2 minutes. Another starter for 10. All of your courses, you've all got face-to-face tutorials in all of your courses. So you're going to have at least 4 opportunities a week to hang out with other people. Okay, that is a fine thing. Because I imagine that for some of you, the last couple of years have been, if you've come out of secondary school in particular, really disrupted and disturbed. And for Pete and Janelle and Matt and I, we have become convinced that all of our students, apart from those we saw on Wednesday, comprise, heads and shoulders and not much else. It's just been a weird kind of way to do the work. All right. Has it been 10? Yes, it's just ticked over. It's been 10 minutes according to my timer. So let's just proceed, shall we? I don't know if I haven't quite got that slide right. It looked really good when I first did it. It's maybe a little bit dark. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the play. It was written by a guy called Greg McGee. It was called Foreskin's Lament, written in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s from memory. McGee's a really interesting character. He was an All Black trialist in the days when the All Blacks had trials. But he wrote a play which is about what I suspect these days would be called toxic masculinity, although it's a bit more than that. It's a really interesting study or exploration of what it meant at that particular point in time to be a particular kind of masculine identity in New Zealand in the 1970s, when things were rather different. A couple of years ago, an Auckland playwright repurposed Foreskin's Lament and called it Boy. And the person in the middle, whose face we can't clearly see, is a non-binary person, and they played the key role. It was a fascinating reworking, and one of the things for people of my generation who were raised on Foreskin's Lament as part of the canon was to see the stunning way in which it was reinterpreted with different understandings about what particular notions of identity meant. It was a really brilliant performance and production. And in a way, that is a part of what this course is about. It has to do with how people make sense of themselves in particular contexts. When you get to do this first assignment, which you will spend the next sort of 5-6 days chugging through, there are lots of places that you can go for content. You don't want to overthink this one. It's only 750 words. So you're going to have 150 words or so per concept. There are 5 of them that you need to deal with. We'll just run very quickly through them here. The critical place to go is the chapter, the introductory chapter in the course text. But there is also a course glossary. When you look at in the stream site, the resources include a glossary, and each of the terms that are a part of that first assignment have a longer, more detailed, reasonably well referenced glossary entry as well. So I'd really strongly advise you to read both the course text, excuse me, but also the glossary entry. And there are other places that you will be able to go to as well. This is one particular definition of the term identity, and it's the answer to the question that the character boy or Foreskin asks at the end. It's a very powerful scene. In the original play, Foreskin sits on a seat, downstage center. The theatre is blacked out. There is a spot that drops down over him, and it is a him at that point in history. He just looks at the audience and he asks the audience 3 times, "What are you? What are you? What are you?" It's a very powerful and kind of challenging and provocative moment because of what has come beforehand. So the question, the question, "What are you?" is in your various malleable, changeable sometimes combinations, is one of the ones that's at the center of this course, but we do it in the context of the encounters that you have with different people in different contexts. There is one definition that is provided, and that's cited by Alakahu, who writes the chapter that you will read for this particular assignment. And there are words that you will come to recognize in this course, subtle interweaving of many different threads. That's just one particular form of language that we use to describe to identity markers like age, gender, occupation, your level of wealth or income, the circumstances out of which you come. And these things are woven together. We use a form of language in an attempt to avoid the suggestion that things are immutable and they are fixed. And we're conscious in this course that we take a particular position on the non-mutable or fluid nature of identity. We try at the same time we don't go into a position that says that everything is completely fluid all of the time. It's a difficult kind of a construct to work with because we need to hold tensions in mind. We need to hold in a kind of a constructive or a fruitful tension, the idea that there are some things that we bring into the world and that are a part of the context in which we exist, but there are things over which we have agency. So we're trying to reach in this course an appreciation of people's sense of who they are that accommodates change and accommodates encounters within context, but which also accepts that there are some fundamentals, some baseline material that is played with as well. So there is a fluidity to the language. It is one of the things I think that for all university students, regardless of which course you're doing, is initially a challenge. The idea is that things that we might have thought were fixed might be seen from different points of view not fixed at all. And that uncertainty and that unpredictability and learning how to live with that is a part of the challenge of becoming a good undergraduate student, irrespective of the course you're doing or the discipline that you are doing. And it's something that characterizes this course. So that is one particular definition of the concept of identity, which is central to this particular course. You are welcome to use that or other definitions that you might come across in your own reading as well in the context of assignment 1. When we talk about contexts, they are myriad and they are legion. We very briefly, we look at contexts in this course as those places where you are constantly engaged in the process of constructing and making sense of and comprehending the different aspects of your identity. The reason why there is a kind of a stock shot of a lecture theatre there, yeah, that would be us normally, but it's not us. Is because this you're a university student. And one of the things that happens when you're a university student, it's not immediately obvious, it kind of evolves over time, but all of a sudden you become aware of the fact that you've learned there is a part of you that becomes a student, and it comes out of the encounters that you have with your colleagues and your friends and the people you share the halls of residence with, your flatmates. It comes out of the relationships you have with your tutors and your other academic staff. One of the reasons why I enjoy giving the lecture on the institutional places is because there are things that are not immediately apparent to you at this point, I suspect, about being a university student that will come to have quite significant effects upon your sense of who you are. Much of that has to do with the discipline and knowledge that you will learn in the time that you are with us. But some of it has to do with, this is a slightly crude form of words, I'm not sure it's entirely appropriate, like knowing your place. Look at that photo. All of you are sitting looking at the person down the front. You are side on to each other. It's a slightly unnatural built environment. It doesn't encourage conversations between you. It encourages your focused attention on that person down the front. So there are norms and conventions and accepted ways of being and unacceptable ways of being which are built into the environments of traditional universities. Some of those are quite disrupted in a stream environment, which is a very, very different kind of a context. There will be some really interesting work that will come out in time, I suspect, over the nature of academic relationships that are mediated via screens rather than those which take place in lecture theatres. Whatever the particulars might be, in this course, the idea of context refers to those myriad places in which you shape your sense of who you are. Citizenship is one of the other concepts that we use and that you are invited to reflect on in your own terms within that first assignment. It's a contested concept. It's not one around which there is universal understanding. There isn't universal understanding within this course. We have endless fruitful conversations about what that term might mean. There is a variety of different definitions that you might use. This little set of those 4 points there I've just taken from the glossary entry on citizenship. You're welcome to use some or all of those, and you're welcome to use the readings from which they are taken. So this is a concept that has been the subject of very different points of view over time and space. Most of you, I think, are probably familiar with the first of those, the kind of the standard definition, the standard conventional definition that comes out of liberal parliamentary and other forms of democracy, which says that as a citizen, you have certain political and social and other rights, and they're largely to do with contributing to and participating in a political entity. We've had lots of conversations in Aotearoa New Zealand over the last couple of years about what those rights are, the extent to which they can be abrogated in a collective interest, the extent to which some people might take issue with the nature of others' rights to behave in certain ways. So whilst we haven't always had public debates in the COVID era framed in the language of citizenship, that's essentially what they have been. They've had to do with what it means to be resident in and or a citizen of this particular place at a really unusual point in history. But there are lots of different ways in which you can approach this. I don't want to go through each of those at length because you'll have time to do that in your toots and in your own thinking and your own reading, but I do want to mention briefly that fourth one. One of the principles behind the construction of what in the BA at Massey we call the core curriculum, of which this course is one of 5 courses, is the idea that citizenship is not just a passive status. It's not just a thing that you either have or you do not have, because citizenship allows for conversations about both inclusion and also exclusion. Classically, in order to be a citizen, you have to meet certain threshold tests, and there are things that we, identity threads. Once upon a time, you had to earn a certain amount of money. Gender has, for many, many, many years in this country, been a fundamental cleavage within citizenship until 1893. If you identified as a woman, you were excluded from very significant political citizenship rights. So there is a passive sense in which citizenship is something that is attributed to you or denied you. But that fourth definition there is really important to this course and to the other courses that comprise the BA core, and that is a much more active and proposive and directive understanding of what citizenship is. It's something that you practice. It's a set of behaviours, a form of conduct, a set of practices and rituals and ways of engaging with the world beyond yourself. So we've got identity, we have context, we have citizenship, and we have contested understandings of each of those. And the challenge for you in that first assignment is to land upon a preliminary understanding which helps you to make sense of particular aspects of your own experience. The last two, relatively straightforward. I think this definition of participation flows out of that previous definition of active citizenship. So it has to do with the acts and the behaviors and the activities that you choose to engage in, whether those are embodied or online, or in most of our cases, a combination of those two things. And the last one, we use this term a lot as well, that sense of belonging. This one is, you know, how do you define that word belonging? Well, the first thing I think that you would want to do is not try to define it ad infinitum and for all time, because this is one of those constructs that is contingent upon particular individuals' circumstances, and their sense of the extent to what it means to belong is very much a function of their own context, their own experiences, their own life histories, their own biographies, and so on. What we're suggesting, a kind of a common ground in between all the contested meetings, might be that sense of being an important part of a community, of your presence and your contribution being valued. The word community, we don't prescribe that. At various times in the course, you'll be invited to reflect on community, what it means to you, and it will be for you to determine the scale at which that word applies. It might be the community that you live within, particularly if you're in a well-functioning flat. You might think of community at a very, very different scale. You might think of yourself as a global citizen in association with particular things. Climate change most obviously comes to mind. You might think of a community, the natural community, as being your local area or your whānau or your extended family or your church community or the nation, or whatever the case may be. So it's a loose, fluid, flexible, plastic kind of a concept. The idea of a belonging, though, the critical thing is that sense that you are valued as a member of that community. That's just a very quick whip through the 5 concepts that you will use for the first assignment, due on Sunday, but you've got a week's extension that's just granted if you need to have more time. Just to reiterate a couple of points. There are lots of ways you can come at these things. The critical thing for us is not that everybody lands on a single unambiguous, universally supported definition, because you won't find those things in this particular college. What you'll find instead are different points of views, which are more or less well argued. What we wanted you to do in this assignment in particular is to take each of those terms and define it, and then point it at yourself. Use it as a lens, if you like, a way of making sense of the place that you inhabit at this particular juncture. That they are sense-making devices. That's essentially what the colleges of humanities and social sciences do, is they provide you with an array of sense-making devices from different disciplinary points of view. So those are just 5 little sense-making tools. We want them to be used in ways which work for and make sense of your own context, your own situations. That's all I wanted to say on that. I don't know if Janelle, Pete, Matt, it's not a requirement. Is there anything you wanted to add? And or are there any questions that any of you want to ask at this point before we launch into something completely different? Okay, Olivia's good.
Yeah, just want to confirm, Richard, that you'll be posting the PowerPoint slides on stream after the lecture.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that
okay,
happens.
yeah,
That happens.
Corin.
Yeah, Corin, we'll do that every week, and it should happen more or less immediately. So by all means, feel free to get very grumpy with me if they're not up there within sort of 24 hours, and send me a short, sharp, sternly worded text to get my act together, but they'll go up straight away, more or less. Okay.
And Courtney, Courtney's just posted a question. Is it appropriate to use the word belonging to describe the term citizenship, if we then define it as a feeling for its own definition? Just a word of caution, these terms we do use quite specifically, so you have to be very careful about them, and not using, for example, belonging quite loosely. If you use it, we assume that you're using it in the way we use it in the course. Anyone else want to elaborate on that? Richard, Matt, Janelle?
Courtney, I entirely take the sentiment behind the question, and I've got an additional comment to make on that. If, as I suspect most of you are, your first year students, it's your first week, you live in uncertain times, it's entirely appropriate and natural to reach for a little more certainty. If you're looking for that certainty, Courtney, go to the course textbook and just work with the definitions that are there. That's probably well, I use the word safest. I don't mean that that is what I might be doing if I was just wishing to kind of minimize the amount of interference and noise that's associated with assignments during your first week. Go to the course text, work with that particular one. There's always a caveat, which there'll be somebody else who'll have a different point of view on this, but we will be using the chapter by Ella in the course text as the sort of fundamental way of framing up the meanings of these things. But your question is a good one, Courtney, because it goes to some really quite critical things. That sense of belonging is sometimes, although not always, associated with being a formal citizen of a political unit. It's not the only, but one of the primary means of structuring citizenship in the contemporary world, Western democratic world anyway, which we claim to be a part of, is the nation state. So if you are a citizen of Aotearoa, New Zealand, then there are certain rights and entitlements and duties and obligations that are incumbent upon you, which may make you feel part of a community. But those things will be denied to people who are not citizens. Those people might be denied, at least temporarily and sometimes for quite long periods of time, to people who are migrants, who have legally circumscribed rights and obligations and duties that fall well short of those.
My microphone is on.
Yeah, your microphone is on, Sam. It's working very well. Did you want to come in with something? No worries, mate. So, Courtney, that there is certainly a relationship between the legal conception of citizenship and the affective condition of feeling whether you belong to or excluded from a place. But I think, to go back to Pete's point, for this first assignment, before we get into those more detailed conversations, just stick with the definition that's in the course text. Guys, is there anything?
And the course glossary as well, as Max pointed out, it's a super useful resource. So those are the two key things and key resources for this assignment: the textbook and the course glossary.
And if in doubt, Courtney and others, check with us, check all the time. Okay, anything else at this point? Okay, I want to, if that's the case, and you have lots of opportunities to come back, keep those questions coming if you need to. I want to just step outside of the specifics of Tūrangawaewae for a moment, because I'd like to take a little bit of time to just sketch out the broader context in which this course and the other courses that comprise the core of the BA, there are 5 compulsory courses in total. I just want to extend something that we picked up on, I think, on the Wednesday, those of you who came to that orientation session that we had on Wednesday in the nice theatre in SGP, where we were appropriately socially distanced. I just want to pick up on one of those things. It'll be relatively brief, but in a course that talks about identity, belonging, and context, I would like to put this course in a broader context. So let me just give you some sense of what that means. And one of the things, I don't think it's such an issue any longer, but when we introduced a compulsory requirement, a compulsory core in the BA in 2016, rolled it out in 2016, it's well embedded now. And it's common practice, virtually all, with the exception of Otago, all New Zealand universities that teach or offer the BA have some kind of compulsory requirement. There were some questions that students quite reasonably asked, so why am I doing this? Why am I doing this when I could be doing something else in media studies or psych or French or whatever the case? Let me give you some reasons about why you are doing this. And I hope that in total, they comprise a reasonably compelling case for doing this and the other courses. The first thing is, historically, arts students have struggled to form a cohort. Some of you, I know, one of you at least, has a partner who is a vet. Others of you will know students who are doing social work or who are doing an occupationally focused qualification, and they will move through that qualification as a cohort, and they will form quite a strong group effect. They'll know what's going on across the other courses, blah, blah, blah. That's often not been the case for the BA. We have quite significant evidence from our students that BA students struggle to find their sense of place within the College of the Humanities and Social Sciences, because they're doing this big, broad, liberal qualification, which is a glorious thing, but it does mean that they get to see their French mates or their people who are doing psychology or whatever the case may be, but they don't kind of get around the rest of the college. We wanted to change that up a wee bit. And so what you will find as you go through the 5 core courses, this one in particular, and the second and third year version of this course, they're quite different courses, but they comprise what we call the citizenship strand. You find yourself being exposed to all sorts of different points of view. Many of those points of view, positions, content, ways of thinking about the world that you won't have been exposed to before, and that you wouldn't have been exposed to if we had not introduced the compulsory core. Some of those will be uncomfortable, some of them will bore you to tears, you'll move quickly on, but some of them will be intriguing. And for some of you, I've no way of knowing this, except in retrospect, I find out, because people come to me 1 or 2 or 3 years afterwards and they say, that thing that happened to me in that class that I didn't really want to do, but I had to because it was a compulsory course, it's completely transformed my life, or it's altered my job, or it's changed the way I think about things. So you will have serendipitous experiences as you move through the compulsory core, which you would not otherwise have had. And that is a part of the conscious design of the course, to expose you to the very, very rich and broad range and interesting range of people and disciplines across the college. In the process of doing that, we expose you to what we in a university call interdisciplinarity. So if you were doing sociology with Janelle and Matt, you would acquire a specific and very powerful set of sense-making lenses, ways of understanding the world. If you're doing psychology, the same would apply. If you were doing social anthropology or English literature, the same would apply. What we want to do in this course, through different presenters and different authors of the written work that you read, and different kinds of digital artifacts that we build into the stream site, is expose you to a whole range of different disciplinary points of view, so that you will have the capacity when you leave your arts qualification to see a thing out there in the world. It might be climate change, it might be the climate crisis, it might be racism, it might be inequality, it might be the reason why this is done, and you'll be able to walk around and make sense of that thing from different points of view rather than having a single stance. Our sense collectively as a college, and there is an employment case for this, which I want to get to shortly as well, is that provides you with a more powerful way of being. It provides you with more opportunities and more flexibility in terms of your own agency, your own ways of acting in and on the world than would be the case if you just did the one thing. The other reason why we wanted to do this is because it's just interesting. There's just a whole lot of interesting stuff that you will come across that you might not otherwise have come across. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really pleased to come back into this course, having been away from it for 3 years. There are other parts of the university where I have been, which are just not as interesting as this course is, by virtue of the fact that it's taught by and populated by staff and students who are from right across the 26 different disciplines that we have in the college. That is a sort of gobbledygooky transferable skills and future thing that I just want to put on pause, because there is some stuff that I want to come back to shortly about that. And the cohort effects, I think I've referred to as well. You will be in this classroom digitally and in face-to-face in your tutorials with people who you will see for the next 3 years. Some of them will become lifelong friends. Some of them you will never see again. Some you will like, some you will take an instant dislike to, whatever, normal stuff. What is critical about this course is that it will enable you or provide you with the opportunity to hang out with people who are not doing your major, who are not doing your minor. But they are people who are curious about the world in exactly the same way as you have. And we know that because they've chosen to come and do this qualification rather than a more specific occupationally defined qualification. That's fine. I'm not ragging on people who do that. But there is something about hanging out with interesting people, I think, which is just a glorious thing to do. And it's not just glorious. It also turns out that it has consequences for that. But before I get to that, I just want to go quickly through this. You'll have forgotten this, but we'll remind you of it each year. I'll remind you of it at the end of this course, and then again when you go into the second year one. There are five core courses. Three of them are at stage one. There's the critical thinking course and the writing and engagement course. Just put those over there. Those are kind of seriously skills-based courses, and their relevance will become clear shortly. This is just a really crude X and Y axis representation of the logic, the cognitive logic behind the three courses that comprise what we informally call the citizenship courses. Tūrangawaewae in stage one, Tūrangaranga in stage two, and Tūtiramai in stage three. And there is a connection. I mean, that plotting is completely forced, but you get the general point. There is a progression from this course into the stage two course and on to the stage three course. Most of our focus in Tūrangawaewae is local. It doesn't have to be that way. You will frequently bring into our course things that are going on out there in the world, which speak to things going on in Aotearoa New Zealand. So that's good. But principally, our focus is on notions of identity and belonging and encounters and the context within which people move in Aotearoa New Zealand. And we're focusing on those two things in particular. How is it that people make sense of themselves and their place in local terms? You will take that stuff and kick it out in two ways in stage three. One of those will be a spatial way, a geospatial way. You go global. You'll take some of the content that you have learned here and some of the distributions, dispositions and the attributes that you've learned in this course, and you'll take them out into the global domain. Rather, however, than focusing on notions of identity and belonging, you will look at the flip side of that, notions of rights and responsibilities. So in those first two courses, we cover off the local and the global, and we cover off internal notions of identity, belonging, and rights and responsibilities. So those are complementary foci, and you bundle all of that up and kick it into action in the stage three course. So the first two courses are they're around reflection and consideration and learning and making sense of. And then when you get to the stage three course, you pick all of that up and you design it into essentially a program of action in relation to an issue of your choosing. So that is how those three citizenship courses go. You will forget most of that detail. The only reason I want that in this set of PowerPoint slides is so that you can just bear in mind when you're doing a specific thing in this course, it will have relevance, it will echo and it will speak to what you do in subsequent courses as well. This is not a hermetically sealed one-off experience which you'll just put aside when you've finished here. You'll take such insights and learnings as you've accrued in Tūrangawaewae into the stage two and the stage three courses. I do want to talk briefly, I'm conscious that it's 25 to and 2 hours minus 10 minutes is a long time to be sitting in a Zoom thing. Part of my job as the biggest part of my job is not in this course. It's in the Provost Chancellor's office. The PVC is like this chief executive, the boss of the college. And much of my work in that context has to do with making the case for the arts. Politically, the disciplines that you're enrolled in, the program that you are enrolled in, we get a bad political press. We get people telling us that it's a worthless qualification, you're never going to find work, and that it's a waste of public money and blah, blah, blah. We get all kinds of kind of ignorant shit that gets dished out by people whose view of education is wholly and reductively instrumental. In other words, people who believe the only reason why anybody should go to a university is so that they can get a job that sounds like the degree that they are doing. That tends to bring out the worst in people like me, Matt, Pete, Janelle, others, because it's a highly restricted and also an inaccurate way of thinking. And I want to look at the inaccuracies in particular. In the digital lecture, in the class that we do, I think it's in week 9 on digital places, we might revisit some of this, but just in really crude terms. It won't be news to any of you, I would not have thought, that when you bring together data processing power, big platforms, big data scraping enterprises, sharp algorithms, machine learning, you have the potential to change the way in which work is undertaken. You have the potential to alter the type of work that is undertaken significantly. If those two things occur, you alter what is required in order to find work. There is a series of stats. They are all speculative. Most of them rely upon the application of methodologies developed elsewhere to the context in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But there is a pretty clear sense now in the world of work, by which I mean public sector, private sector, and not-for-profit sector employment, that the things that people do for remuneration in this country are shifting and changing, and they are doing so at pace. That third stat is a really particularly important one, I think. It suggests to me that even if that figure is not 65%, but it's 30%, maybe it's higher than that. We don't know. We won't know until we're able to look in the rear vision mirror. But if we know that a whole lot of you people are going to be doing work that has not yet been called into existence, that sends a really clear message to us about the ways in which we might help you by appropriately configuring the kinds of courses that you do while you're with us. In particular, what it says to us, and I completely condensed down about 4 years worth of work in this one sentence. It says to us that we need to do a better job of designing into the courses you do while you are part of the arts qualification with us, transferable skills. It's a clunky term. I don't have a better term. I'm open to suggestions if you have one. The idea is essentially that we design into our courses the sorts of skills that mean that you can't be automated out of existence, basically. The things that are a function of the human condition, the capacity for empathy and compassion and for critical thinking and for effective and collegial communication and the ability to walk around corners and see things that you might not otherwise have seen where you're not disposed to walk around that corner. All those things that are difficult to quantify, hard to measure, but absolutely critical to the future of work are the sorts of things that we have designed into the compulsory courses. They're also present in the other courses as well. Who knows if it's going to be 5 different careers or 70s employees? We got no idea. That information comes out of the United Kingdom. It's just been tweaked for the New Zealand context. But we know that you're unlikely, unless you're a teacher or a nurse, and even then you're going to be doing different jobs within a profession. But you are much more likely than I am, for instance, to do a whole range of different things. So you just need to have good minds. Essentially, if we were to teach you technical skills now, that would just be a dumbass thing to do because they would be out of date kind of immediately, and if not immediately, at least within a very short time horizon. So the best thing that we can do for you, purely in terms of positioning you for work in the future, whenever that might be, and I'm conscious of the importance of finding work when you leave this place, the best thing we can do is to really work hard on your transferable skills, on your capacity to describe, on your capacity to reflect, on your capacity to critique, on your capacity to interrogate. All of those things that are designed into the learning outcomes for this course and for all of the other courses that you will do, not only in the core, but within your major and minor disciplines as well, they're all based upon essentially the capacity to think, the ability to learn a thing, then to unlearn that thing when circumstances change and relearn a new thing. Just a couple of quick banks. Lynn Cobley, former CEO now, I don't know where she's gone, she was CEO until 2018. She's not talking about BCom or BBuzz or accountancy students. She's talking about people who look like you. And she's a banker, more than that, she's a kick-ass, high-powered banker. This one here fascinates me. It's old now, it's 2012, 2013. So actually, I've got the date wrong because I can't see how something that happened in 2013 was reported in the Washington Post in 2012. That should be 20. Oh no, that's the American date, isn't it? That's the 20th of December or something. I don't know. do some Googling if you're interested in this. This really, really interests me that, you know, in the Googleplex, they run a program where they get all of their hiring data, all of their termination data, all of their data about promotions and non-promotions and so on. They're trying to figure out what the perfect Google employee looks like, as they would. I mean, this stuff is sort of ethically dubious, or at least questionable. I think you can have an interesting conversation about this. The one thing about this that absolutely intrigues me is that the high people of the AI age have found that the least important thing, if you're going to be a really high-performing employer at Google, is to have IT skills. The most important thing is to have attributes and dispositions that sound like you've just done a major in English or theatre or philosophy or French literature or Japanese or politics or sociology or social anthropology or political geography or whatever the case may be. The bankers are talking about our people, and the Google people are talking about our people as well. So this looks like a very, very different world of work to me. So if you're sitting thinking at some point in Tūrangawaewae or Tūrangaranga or Tūtiramai, if you're thinking, oh man, I just can't see the application of this content, what I want you to think about is not so much the content, but more what is going on within my mind? What is my capacity to entertain points of view that are not mine like? What is my capacity to listen to another person like? Have I questioned my own thinking? Have I demonstrated to myself, much less to Pete, Janelle, Matt, or me, the ability to just subtly alter a position based on the gathering of new and more compelling evidence? What's my ability like just to have a conversation with somebody who I might not have had a conversation with a year ago or 2 years ago? I think, and I said this on Wednesday, I think if you leave this university the same person you are now, we will have failed you and you will have let yourself down. The entire function of being at a university, and particularly in the humanities and the social sciences, and even more specifically in this course, is that we invite you to question yourself. Not to undermine yourself, not to create additional anxiety, but just to question the way in which you make sense of the world that you inhabit or the worlds that you inhabit. And just kind of serendipitously, it turns out that if you can do those things, you're going to be fine when it comes to finding work in the world. More, I can't say more, that sounds patronizing. I don't mean to do that at all. Certainly as importantly is the Roosevelt question. She asks the question in 1949, it's a graduation address to, I would imagine at that time, a kind of an Eastern Seaboard liberal arts university in the United States. And she asks this question, and it's absolutely timeless, I think. In fact, if anything, my sense is that question is more compelling now than it might have been then. I can't say that. That's actually quite a foolish thing to say. That was 1949, after a second global conflagration. So it was a really critical question to ask, and it's a really important question to ask now, I think, as well. And it turns out, if you reflect on how you might answer Eleanor Roosevelt's question, that you wind up back with Lynn Cobley, and you wind up back in the Googleplex. You wind up thinking about thinking well. You wind up reflecting on being able to hold your peace in challenging circumstances. You wind up thinking about being able to get along with somebody who looks a little different to you, who has a different worldview, who might have a religious or a different religious positionality. You just wind up being able to cope with difference and uncertainty and diversity, and you can deal with things coming at you from left or right field. You wind up being fluid and flexible and able to move and navigate around uncertainty and unpredictability in ways which you cannot do if you are dogmatic and you just need to hold the line. That kind of language, I think, is profoundly reductive and profoundly unhelpful. All of that by way of saying that this course is about identity. It is about belonging. It is about being included and about those people are excluded. Fundamentally, it is about encouraging you to take the opportunities we provide you to reflect and to think. We've chosen a particular curriculum through which we provide you with those opportunities, but sitting underneath everything you do in this course is the invitation to reflect and to listen. One last thing.
Puppy doesn't have practice, so we're going to go in for a swap, but it's kind of hard to compare because
it's completely hard to compare. I couldn't agree more with whoever you are. It's very hard to compare. Comparing things is really difficult. Comparing and contrasting things is, the language of comparison is one of the, we kick it around all the time, but it's a difficult thing to do, and it's an absolute skill that you will learn in this course in our career, because it requires you to step outside of yourself. And that is not a thing that necessarily comes naturally to any of us. And I find it at 58. It's still a hard thing to do. And I need to be reminded by my daughters and my partner to step outside of yourself without getting aggressive or defensive or violent or disrespectful of other people, and just compare things. But it is an absolute art form and a skill. And it's not something that comes easily or naturally to many of us. One last thing before we, I'll just leave you with a few minutes to wrap up any loose ends. If we were, as we would all want to be, in an actual lecture theatre, if we were face to face, kanohi ki te kanohi, and we were in the same room, this would make much more sense. What I'm suggesting here is that in this course, we offer you loads of opportunities to express yourself. This group of people, Pete, Matt, Janelle, and myself, we are real guns at working a room. We know how to bring you out of yourself. We know how to listen to you. We're very good at picking up the cues about who needs to say something but is not quite sure. We're very good at leaving you in peace if that's what you wish to be. But we give you lots of opportunities to express yourself. What is also required is the ability to listen. It is a precondition in my world anyway, that my right to express my opinion cannot exist without the equivalent right to listen to the position of another person. I do not necessarily need to agree with that person. I don't have to like them. They don't have to be my best mate. But I do need to listen to them at some level. And so in this course, what we invite you to do is both give voice to your own positions, but also to listen to those of others. In a Zoom environment, that's a lot harder to do. There is just something about a two-dimensional square environment which makes it hard to get any real tempo and rhythm. It's like there's no rhythm section in a Zoom band. There's just the lead singer and there's no rhythm section at all. It's impossible to get going. But you can do that in your face-to-face tutorials. You can do that in the conversations you'll have with the people you share flats and halls with. We'll do our best to enable that kind of conversational environment in the Zoom contexts and in our forums and so on. But this course is about listening as much as it is about giving voice. And I think I can speak on behalf of my friends and colleagues when I say, we hope that you enjoy it. We hope you learn stuff. We hope you're challenged by it. We hope that sometimes your brains hurt for really good reasons. We know that there are parts of the course that will be more difficult than others for some of you. We welcome your engagement around those things. And we hope the rest of your week goes well. And I'm just going to stop that now. Okay. That is a lot of stuff to get through in 2 hours or 1 hour and 50 minutes. Look at you, you're bloody fantastic. You've just about all got your screens on. And if you haven't, that is fantastic too. Anything that we need to cover off, anything we haven't done, you haven't done. I've got one last slide I forgot. It's the kind of to-do list. But before I go back to it, it's 11:50, badly in need of a coffee. So let's get out of here quickly. Any questions you have, any concerns you have, anything that's not quite right?
No, but I will just say Richard probably is the one out of the 4 of us that's closest to her undergrad, I would say. I know it's probably, there's a lot of information, probably seems really overwhelming right now, especially a lot of you are first years, but just remember that we're always going to be here and available and very supportive. And especially those tutorials is where we're going to nut this out. So don't stress too much at this stage. I know it's a lot that you have stuff due in the first week, technically the second week with an extension, but you'll get there and everything will be fine. Because I remember feeling that way too. That's it.
Well said, Janelle.
Yeah,
We're here to help.
I agree with Janelle, except my memories of feeling that way are so vague and so far away as to be completely irrelevant. So listen to her. If she's saying it, then it's true. And the toots are super critical because they are where you nut stuff out, as Janelle said. Okay, on that note, here's the things you need to do. Go to your tutorial. Do the reading for the first week, please. Familiarize yourself if you haven't done so with the course guide. Choose your tutorial if you haven't done so. Tutu around the stream site just so that you're familiar with that. Let either Janelle or Matt or Pete or me know if you've got any questions or concerns. I've got a little list of things to do. Pete's already done one of those, but just correct those links. Thank you, Pete. Welcome to the course. And now please go forth and do whatever it is that you have to do with the rest of your Mondays.
Probably one last thing.
Yep.
I would say read the course guide, guys. Like read the course guide. Most of your questions will be answered in that course guide. It's very comprehensive. Richard's done a great job. So everything you need to know is in there. Read it twice, for sure.
Yeah, we might throw in a little test on the course guide. No, we won't do that. But that's Janelle's right. That is something that people often forget to do. If you've got a question, chances are it's answered in there. If it doesn't, come to us. But read the course guide. Just on top of that. Okay, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for zooming in. Go well for the rest of the week. I will see you next Monday. Pete, Janelle, and Matt will see you during the week. And we're looking forward to the next 12 weeks. Right, off you go into the wild blue yonder.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And you're polite to boot.
Thank you.
You just have to stay with us forever, you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
I think we're up to 25.
Thank you.
I think that's ever happened before.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Next week.
you.
Thanks. Have a nice coffee.
Yeah, I will, at least one.
Wow, so many cameras on. I was not expecting that.
No, that was great. Actually, that
Yeah.
was so nice that people left the cameras on.
Good job.
You can turn the recording off now, Richard.
I've
Yeah,
saved,
yes, please.
I've saved the chat, Pete, and I'll turn the recording off.